This is an overview of the installation of Guide on the Side, an open-source interactive guide-making tool developed at the University of Arizona. I'm Lauren Magnuson from the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana. You can contact me with questions about this video at lpmagnuson on Twitter. So the first step to installation is fairly easy. We're just going to download the zip file from the University of Arizona Guide on the Side website. And in our next step, we're just going to take the zip file that we downloaded and FTP it with FileZilla up to the domain that we want to upload it to. So our next step, I'm going to use terminal to SSH into my server using the username and password provided to me by my host. And now I'm actually just going to change directory into my domain, and then you can see I've got my guideontheside.zip file in there. So I'm just going to run a command that will unzip that file. So I just type unzip and then the name of the zip file that I am unzipping. And now you can see the result of unzipping. I've got a new directory just called Guide on the Side with no file extension. So that tells me that's a new directory that I've created. So now I'm going to change directory into my new Guide on the Side directory, and it's going to show me that now I've got a file in there called config.sample.yml. And this is the file that we're going to need to edit to basically set up all the configuration settings for the local installation of Guide on the Side. So now you can see I'm just downloading that config.sample.yml file to my desktop from FileZilla, and then I can open it up in a text editor like Text Wrangler and then edit that file with the configuration settings I need. So the major thing to keep in mind when editing this file, the database section is probably the most important section you'll need to edit, and that's going to contain information about your MySQL database that you're creating for this installation. If you're working with a hosting provider like DreamHost, like we are in this example, you can just basically go into your hosting provider and then create your MySQL database. So create a new database. Usually you'll associate that database with a particular host, and then you'll also have a username and password associated with that MySQL database, and that's what you're going to need to enter into your config.yml file. So returning to that config.sample.yml file, I'm going to rename it config.yml, which will change it to the production configuration file. Once you've filled out your MySQL database information, associate an email address with your application so that users can receive emails from the system, and also so that you can receive feedback from users from the system. If you want to include Google Analytics, you can insert just your tracking ID number in your config.yml. And there are other interesting settings in here, but these are the ones that I always fill out before completing installation. Once you've saved your edited config.yml file, you can drag it and drop it back into FileZilla, back into the same directory the config.sample.yml file is. And you can leave that sample file in there, it doesn't hurt anything. In the next steps, I'm changing directories in Terminal to the app directory, and then I'm going to run two commands that are included in the install.md file. You can actually copy and paste each of the commands. Once you run them, you'll get a message that says all migrations have completed for each command. For the final steps, I just need to change some permissions so that my librarian content creators can upload content. I'm going to move up a directory, and then again, I can copy and paste these commands directly from the install.md file. Notice when I execute these commands, I don't actually get anything back. The terminal doesn't tell me anything. I don't get a message that my commands were accepted. As long as I don't get anything back, usually that's okay. So I can just move on. So now if everything went as planned, I should have a working installation at my domain in the subdirectory for Guide on the Side. So once I go there, if I load a page that looks something like this, then I know my installation was successful. If you have more questions about installation that are specific to your unique environment, I highly recommend participating in the Guide on the Side Google group. Just go to groups.google.com and search Guide on the Side, and there are a lot of really active users that you can get really good advice from.